everybody. Welcome to another edition of Girl That'll Preach, the podcast where I invite my friends to share the passions that God has placed in their hearts. Today, I am so happy to have Kelly Bailey as my guest. You're going to love her. We've already been sitting here talking, and I've just been enjoying the discussion before we even started recording. Kelly is one of the coolest women that I have ever met. If I remember correctly, we met at, it was a Pendel event where we were both working on the itineration process. For those of you who don't speak AG, like me, I wasn't raised as Assemblies of God, so I don't know all the lingo. It took me a while. Itineration is where foreign missionaries like Bobby and Kelly and US missionaries like Jamie and I travel around to all the different churches trying to raise our financial support budget. And we were at this event, and Kelly and Bobby were at a table, and we were set up near them. And when you go to these events, you're talking to people, but during all the breaks, you're talking to all the other missionaries who are around you. And so we spent that couple of days getting to know Kelly and Bobby, and I immediately liked you. I was like, this is my kind of person. I like her. In addition to being a missionary, a strong woman of God, a wife to Bobby, and a mom to 3 grown children who I know she'll tell you about, Kelly, you are one of the most relatable people that I know. I mean, you are just genuine, and I love that about you. You're not afraid to laugh at yourself or share an amusing anecdote. I remember one day you were telling a story about you guys were on the road, and you thought you packed your favorite pants, but you had packed a pair of pants that were skinny and uncomfortable. And by the time you got done telling this story, everybody who was reading it was laughing, and just whatever point you were trying to make, they were all getting it. And it was just, you were so open and honest that you just encouraged everybody that day. And that's just kind of who you are. You're very honest, very genuine. And because of that, you just encourage everyone around you. And I appreciate that about you. So you're going to love Kelly. She's genuinely warm. She's a friendly person. You love babies.
I do. Oh, I love babies.
But Kelly near a baby, and she's gone for a while.
Yep.
And I'm just so glad to have time to be able to do this and chat and kind of share this. So welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Adessa. I'm happy to be here.
So I was wondering if you could start off telling us a little bit about your testimony. What it was like growing up, when you accepted Jesus, just kind of a little bit about your journey with him.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, and ditto. I know we did meet then, and it was awesome, and I feel like we definitely got a bond with you and Jamie too, so that's fantastic. I love meeting new friends along the way. That's been one of the best parts of this whole life that we're living right now. So I was born in Michigan, and my mom and dad were pastors. So I was born and raised a PK, but I started off in Michigan, and we kind of traveled around a little bit. Went from church to church a little bit. Really the whole time my parents were in full-time pastoral ministry. But when I started my walk with Jesus, I remember it. I was 4 years old. It's one of my first memories. I was 4 years old, and I was at a kids' crusade, and Miss Melody Williams with her, one of those dummies, you stick the hand up and okay. So I forget the name of it. It was one of those.
Yeah. Like a puppet and a marionette, something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. And his name was PJ. And I was convinced that PJ was actually alive. And now I look back, it's probably kind of creepy because PJ was kind of creepy looking. But then at 4, I'm like, it just ministered to my heart so much, the things that I learned from PJ and Miss Melody that week. And that was when I remember I walked to the altar and I gave my heart to Jesus. And that was like the first time that I was like, oh yeah, I love Jesus and I know who Jesus is. And just from there, I was raised as a pastor's kid, and I have an older brother and an older sister who we all just kind of grew up together. We ended up living in Michigan, and mainly Michigan and Wisconsin, mainly Wisconsin. We moved there when I was younger, and God was really faithful. He always has been, but it was one of those things where I grew up in a really good, loving home with parents who loved Jesus, and they were in full-time pastoral ministry for a long time. Didn't always, they didn't do everything right, but they loved Jesus, and they proved, through the learning, the mistakes they made, and how they learned and how they grew from that. We learned from that as their kids. And so, but that's how I grew up. That's how I became a follower of Jesus. And obviously later on in my life, when I became a teenager, I realized I had to really grow my relationship with the Lord. It couldn't stay at 4 with Melody, Miss Melody, and TJ, but I did. That's the first time I really sensed who Jesus was, and I accepted him in my heart, and I never looked back. I'm really grateful for the protection and the hand of God in my life, where from pretty much that moment, I was a follower of Jesus, and I never went through a phase where I didn't have a relationship with him. And I remember in high school, I would walk the halls of my high school, and I would have this constant dialogue with the Lord in my head, just constantly. And I probably looked like I was talking to myself, and I looked a little cuckoo, but he was just always so present in my life. And I'm so grateful for that. And I've tried to continue that. But yeah, so that's kind of where I come from and where I grew up. And then I met my husband when I was 17 years old, and fell completely in love with him because he was so cute. I just really liked his looks. He was so handsome. And I'm not going to lie, it was a really great, he was a good looking dude. And so I'm like, oh, I didn't think I had a chance with him. Didn't think it was going to happen. I was young, didn't want to get married that young, you know. And then 2 weeks after my 19th birthday, I was married, and I was a pastor's wife. And I was really, really young and immature. And by the grace of God, he gave me a husband who showed me a lot of grace. And, but I learned a lot. But yeah, so went right from my father's home into my husband's home, and went right from being a pastor's kid to being a pastor's wife, and learned a lot of things along the way. But yeah, so that's kind of where and now we're full-time pastor. We're going to be, we work in North Africa now. We're in missions, and we went over there in 2016, and God, it's a really cool how God just kind of orchestrated everything. I knew I would go into missions one day. I was like 8 years old when I realized, okay, I want to go to Africa. I want to be a missionary. 8 years old. And I just knew that that's what God had for me. But when life happens, and you're following the Lord, and you want to do what's right, but then you get married, and you start a different life, and you're in pastoring, and it's just like, okay, so maybe I'm supposed to give to missions and go on missions trips, and then, but I always had Africa in my heart. And so when the opportunity came for us to move to Africa, it really was almost a full circle moment for me. I'm like, wow.
I didn't know that.
I was very young.
Wow.
Very young when I knew that I was supposed to go into missions. I just didn't know what that would look like. And it's a different part of Africa than I envisioned as well, And so we're in North Africa, and we live in a mostly 99.7% Muslim country. And it's just a completely different context than what I'd anticipated, but he's so faithful. And so here we are, and we've been married for 25 years, and most of that spent in full-time pastoral ministry. And it's been a blessing. I'm grateful for the God's provision. And but that's how I got started. And that's there's a whole lot of other stuff in there, but we'd be here for like 24 hours.
So how did you know that it was time to leave pastoral ministry and go into missions?
We had a missionary. We were sitting on the front row of our church one Sunday morning, and we had a visiting missionary come in. And this visiting missionary came in, and he was married, and he had 5 kids, and they all ranged from age like 3 to 16. And our 3 kids were like, I think they were around the same ages, and as the older kids. And so we were sitting there, and they were talking about how they were getting ready to move to North Africa he was a businessman. He had been in plumbing. Mm-hmm. And what he ended up doing was he literally said, okay, this is what God wants us to do. Sold everything, packed up everything, and moved to North Africa. And we hadn't been in this campus pastoring for very long. And we were wanting to grow something there. We were excited, and we really felt like God put us there for a purpose. And so when these missionaries came in, and we were sitting there, and we were like, if they can do it, we can do it. But now this whole time during our whole life, we were thinking, how do we how do we make this happen? Because we know God wants us to do this, but it's not happening. He's leading us down these different roads. And, hindsight, you can look back and see God's hand on it and see how we were led to our children. We were led to different things that God was preparing us. But it was definitely a Jesus moment for us. We were sitting in Chili's with this couple, and we were sitting at a Chili's restaurant. We were just talking about, we really felt God was talking to us about going and following the same path they had. So we just wanted more information. And I was speaking with the wife, and we had become really good friends. And she's like, oh, they're getting ready to open a new launch team or start a new ministry in this country. And as soon as she said the country, God confirmed it.
Wow.
Like, I got goosebumps in the middle of a restaurant. It was confirmed. I didn't say anything. to Bobby. I'm like, oh, okay. It was confirmed in my spirit, though. We go out to the car, and we get in the car, and we look at each other, and we're like, we're going to this country. And we both had been confirmed like that. And from there, it was bam, bam, bam. And a year and a half later, 2 years later, something like that, we were in country.
Wow. That's awesome.
And he just got our kids ready. And so that's kind of our story into actually getting to the field.
That is such a great story. So you kind of brought up your kids, and before an 8-year-old, in between an 8-year-old being told you're going to the mission field and going to the mission field, God led you on a bunch of other adventures. One of which was adopting your kids. So can you kind of tell us how that came about and how God orchestrated that in your life?
Yeah, for sure. We got married in 97. And, as a little girl, there were a couple of things that I knew that I knew that I was going to do. I knew I was going to go into missions one day, and I was going to go to Africa, and I knew I was going to be a mommy. I just wanted that. Maybe I didn't know it. I wanted it. It was a deep desire of mine. And I love babies. As you can tell, that is not a new recent development. I've always loved kids. And so I just, whenever the time came and I got married, I thought, the normal thing was, okay, in 2-3 years, we'll have our first kid. And we always thought about adoption and talked about it. But in my mind, it was always, well, I'll do it after we have our kids. And I didn't understand it. I didn't know a lot about it. I didn't know anything about the children's services. I didn't know anything about the foster care system at all. To me, it was just, this is what I want to do one day. Well, we'd been married for about 6 years, and it had been probably for about 2 solid years. We wanted to have a baby, and it wasn't happening. And I can't tell you, every month I'd take tests after tests, and they'd all come back negative. And it was hard. I felt like my heart it was really getting beat up, because it was a desire to be a mom. I really, really wanted to do that. And I felt like this was not meeting my expectations of what it was supposed to be like. I went in with expectations of one day I'm going to be a mom, and I'm going to have a baby, and I'm going to have kids. And in my mind, I knew how it was supposed to work. And so I had missed expectations. It wasn't happening the way I thought it should, and so forth. And so it was a rough night, and I'd had to take another test, and I had come back negative, and I was just like, okay, Lord. And we'd gone to doctors, and there really was nothing wrong. It was just one of those things where it just wasn't happening. And so I went to the Lord, and I'm like, okay, clearly I need, what am I supposed to do? How do I navigate this pain, the season that I'm in? I knew women at that time who had gone through like miscarriages, and they were dealing with that. And in my mind, that was just worse than anything. I couldn't fathom having to go through that trauma. So it's kind of like whenever you're having a hard time, but you feel like you can't allow yourself to grieve or feel bad about it because somebody has it worse. And in your mind, you're like, well, should I really be crying about this? I'm happy. I have a great marriage. I have a great husband, but she doesn't, and she's going through this. And do I really? And I'm like, yeah, God sees your pain. And no matter how small you think it is, or how in relation to somebody else's pain, that's not what you're meant to do. When you're going through something and it's grief and it's trauma, he wants to meet you where you are, and he wants to see, and he sees you. and it's valid. You have to walk through it. And so the Lord he was so gracious to me and so tender with me. He just said, Kelly, do you want to be a mom or do you want to have a baby? You really need to figure that out. Do you want to have a baby and carry a baby, or do you want to be a mom?
Wow.
And in my mind, and when I was a little girl, I never thought about, I want to carry a baby, like have a baby. I'm like, I just want to be a mom. And that was the desire of my heart. So I'm like, Lord, I just want to be a mom. If you could just make me a mom. And that was a turning point for me, with the way a shift in my head and a shift in my thinking of, okay, God can do anything and he can restore this. I just have to figure out if I'm okay with it not being the way I always expected it to be. And he did that. He really helped my heart, and he grew my heart, and he opened my mind, and he opened my heart to adoption. And we were living in North Carolina at the time. And it was like one of those things where we just woke up one day. We're like, I'm ready to be a mom. Are you ready to be a dad? And he's like, yeah. He's like, well, how about we look into adoption and see what our options are? And I'm telling you, we looked at private adoption. We looked at everything. And we walked into the Department of Children's Services in North Carolina one day. We were like, we're interested in adoption. And they sat down with us and they said, well, there's this thing called foster to adopt, where children who are in the system and their parental rights are being terminated for some reason or another, they'll be eligible for adoption. If you wanted to go that route, you could have a child placed with you pretty quickly and the adoption process would start. There is never, in that situation, you're not given a guarantee. Right. You are opening your heart up to something that may not work. But we were like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And I'm like, well, I really want a baby. I'd like to have a baby. And she's like, we can put you down for a baby. She's like, but if you're willing to go a little older, you will have a child placed with you a lot faster. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll go up to 4 years old, but that's it. That's the limit. And because I really wanted a little one. And so we walked out of that day and we were like, okay, this is the path we're supposed to go. We did all the paperwork. We did all the training. 6 months to the day, we had a 4-year-old little girl. Aww. Her name is Megan. We met her at a little hotel. Her foster parents brought her, and she knocked on the door, and we opened the door, and she was wearing a little yellow sundress. She had baked us cookies, and her name is Megan, and she was 4 years old. And that was it. We were goners. We took one look at her and we were like, oh yeah, you're mom. This is going to work. And so Megan is our oldest. She's 22 now, and she just graduated from Evangel University this year. But she had spent 2.5 solid years in foster care, in and out of foster homes. And there's stuff that comes from that. There's stuff that comes with that. And but God has done such a work in her life, and now she's working and living her life, and that's how we got Megan. Mm-hmm. And we just, the dream to have a baby never died. It just disappears. But God really fulfilled the desire of my heart with her adoption, and that made me a mama and Bob a dad, and so 6 years later, we're kind of at this crossroads where we're like, okay, do we want to do this again? I mean, it was a lot of hard work and working through stuff with Meg, but she's 10 now. Do we want to do this again? Do we want to add to our family? And we all decide, yes, let's look into it. And we started the process in about a year. Megan was 9, and about a year later, right after she had turned 10, we got a phone call for twin boys. They were 6. And they'd been in the system for too long. They'd been in the system for a while, and they'd been hurt, and it was a hard season for them. But we met them, and that was it. And Dylan and Devin joined us at 6, and that was it for us. We were like, this is good. God's done something really special here, and it was hard. Adoption is a beautiful, miraculous thing, but you have to go into it as a parent saying, this is it, Lord, we're committing to this. We're almost like you're making a covenant, like you do when you get married or whenever you're making a covenant before the Lord. I'm giving my life to this. I'm come hell or high water, come, sickness and in health. This is it. And you have to be able to make that commitment to these kids. And especially if you adopt older kids, They're coming to you with life experience that you don't really understand. And what's hard is that they come to you with life experience that it's so hard for them to work through, and you have to be committed, and they commit to you and you need to be committed to them. And so it changed our lives, and it really, really, it really adjusted my whole mindset of what family looks like and parenting looks like. And now they're all 3 out of the house. Megan's 22, the boys are 18, one's at North Central University, one's in the Marine Corps. And it's just like, they're all out and doing their own thing. And in the season that we're in now, I had to release that dream of becoming a mom the way I thought I should have. And it was the most rewarding thing I ever did, because the 3 kids I have are the 3 kids that I was supposed to have. Mm-hmm. Now I'm having to release them. I am not good at that.
Empty nest. I have a few friends who are going through that.
Yeah, I'm not good at it. I'm not good at it at all. And I'm driving my kids nuts. And I love them so much, but it's been really hard to release them to their own lives and making their own decisions. But the Lord has just reminded me over again, I gave them to you. You've done what I've asked you to do. I need you to hold them loosely because they're mine, and I've got a plan for them. And so we're just like, fly, wait, come back, fly. No, you need to come back. So I'm learning. Bob's doing a much better job than I am. He's like, see you later. Let's have a party. Let's go to North Africa. I'm like, wait, I'm not there yet, but.
That's a mom thing though.
It is. It has to be, I think. But yeah.
With my friends who are going through it, I'm seeing it's much more on the mom's half than on the dad's half. So
it is. I think for me, my personal story, it's because when we got them, I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. I had to be. And I just this is what's hard. Your kids kind of become your life and your identity a little bit, and you don't even realize it's happening. And then they're gone, and you wake up and they're all gone, and they're living their own lives. And maybe they're making decisions you'd want them to make, and maybe they're not making decisions you'd want them to make, but you're trusting the Lord with them. But you're still like, okay, Lord, I know you're not done with me. I don't feel like you should be done with me. So what do I do now? That's the season I find myself in personally, even though we have a plan, and we do have a plan, and we are going to North Africa, and we're going to be pastoring there, an international church, and we're really excited about it. I'm still personally trying to figure out, but what do I do? Who do I pour into now?
Had your kids gone with you to Africa the first time?
They did. Yep.
Did. This is the first time that they won't be there.
Yes. Now, Megan went to college. When we went over to Africa, Megan was with us for about a year, and then she went over back. I took her back to college, and that was another part of releasing her. But it's interesting. I handled that release a lot better than I am handling this one with the boys going. And now it's almost like I'm trying to bring Megan back as well. Like, okay, you're not ready to be on your own yet, when she's really been on her own
for a while.
She's taken a lot of deep breaths. Mm-hmm. And she's just like, I love you, Mom. You need to chill. Like, I know. So they were with us. And so now it's just trying to figure that out. And I think probably a lot of women and moms go through that. And when you're in full-time pastoral ministry too, you have a call in your life, and you want to fulfill that calling, and you want to do what God wants you to do, and you want to love well. And meanwhile, you have all this other stuff going on in your head and in your heart, and you're just like, okay, Lord, how do I release this so you can use it to minister to others? And sometimes I'm not really great at that, and I'm still learning.
And it all happens during this lovely time of life.
Yes.
When you're going through menopause anyway. So, I mean, it's just.
Yes. It's such a joyful time. I think my husband will look back at this time with me during this last year, and he'll be like, that was probably the hardest year of our lives. And I hate to say that it's not my fault. I've trained all of my children to view it as a medical condition.
Yes, Exactly.
It is
I
a
wrote
medical
a whole
condition.
chapter in my last book about that. It is a medical condition.
It is a medical condition. And like, I remember my son, Devin, my sweet son, Devin, I had a little area in our kitchen in Africa where we lived, where I had a table set up. It was my quiet time because it was a smaller place, and I was the only girl because Megan had left and I had all boys. I'm like, okay, when I'm in my quiet time, please just, and I'd had a rough day, and I'm sitting in my chair, and I think I must have had a look on my face like of total desolation. I don't know. But Devin comes in, he's like, how you doing, Mom? And I'm like, I'm doing all right, son. He's like, is it that thing, that woman thing? And he did like his hands like this. And I'm like, yes, it's my medical condition. I think that might be some part of it. He's like, okay. And he hugged me and he walked out. And I'm like, wow, I've trained them well. But so it's just, yeah, you bring all that stuff together, and you bring the hormones and the releasing of the kids and the season that we're in with ministry. And, even in ministry, whenever when things don't go the way you think they should in your ministry opportunity that you're in, and you kind of feel like you haven't, whether people view it as that or like a failure, like, well, that didn't go the way I thought it would, or that didn't happen the way I thought it should have. And you put all this work my lesson for this year, probably the last year and a half, 2 years, has been the Lord just reminding me, none of this is yours. You need to hold it loosely, because you need to be able to release it, because in all reality, everything we do when we raise our kid, from raising our kids to our relationships with our family, to our relationships on the field or in ministry partners or in pastoring and whatever that looks like, none of it is ours. It's all for the glory of God. Everything we do is for the glory of God. And so when it goes well, it's not about you. It's about the glory of God. And when it doesn't go well and it doesn't meet expectations, it's not about you. It's all of that to the glory of God. And he's doing something in that. And that's been a huge season for me of walking through that. And it hasn't been easy. I will readily admit, my counselor will tell you, it has not been easy, but it's been good. I'm just glad he's still got something for me. It just means he's still working.
These are things that I think we're all going through as women. I mean, we can all relate to so much of what you're saying. And it reminds me of that scriptures that, we're all just jars of clay.
Mm-hmm.
He's using us, but we're all just a little broken. We're all so basically in need of him every single day, because we're going through our stuff and he's still using us while we're going through our stuff. And we just stand back and we're like, wow, I can't believe you're still using me when I'm such a literal hot mess right now.
Yes. I was just going to say hot mess. You know what? The fact that you bring that up, we have a colleague that we worked with, and he did a Bible study one time. He did like a devotional, and he was talking about that in the jar of clay, and how he could associate it with what we were doing there and what our mission was there with learning language. We had to learn a very difficult language, and we were really bad at it. And
I wanted to ask you how that was trying to learn language, because I had to take language in college.
Yeah.
The professor, he had a soft spot, and I think I got a D. Awesome. And he didn't tell me, but it was bad.
Well, just to put it into just so you can kind of get an idea, when Bob and I got to the field, we were the oldest members of the team and the oldest students at the school. And everybody else was pretty young, fairly young, and young marrieds or young singles. And it was just like, and we were in a class with a young single girl. Oh, she's awesome. And she was such a sweetheart, because she could go out in the evenings and like get into the community and pick up these different sayings, and she'd come in the next day and like be able to have a whole dialogue. And I'd be looking at her, but she'd have she'd say something and I'd be like, I don't think we learned that yet. I'd look in my notes. I'm like, yeah, we haven't learned that yet. But it's because she was able to get out in the community. She was doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing, and she was fantastic. And I felt so bad, because I felt like Bob and I were kind of delaying her progress because the teacher had to take special time with us. But what our colleague had said about the jars of clay, he's like, whenever we'd get discouraged, he was so great. He's like, listen, he said, if anything, the more you mess up in front of these people where you're trying to learn the language, the more they see your humility and the more they see you just trying. Mm-hmm. If you came in and you were perfect, they wouldn't want to open up to you because they wouldn't see that you're human. When you allow the cracks and the broken, the brokenness of yourself, when you allow that to be visible and transparent, like when you're trying to learn this language and you're making a mess of it, mm-hmm. and these people who are amazing people look at you and see you trying to communicate with them, they don't see the mess, they see the effort. Wow. They see the heart behind just wanting to communicate, and it brings them joy, and that means they want to invite you in. She's like, if you came in and you were perfect and you knew the words and you knew the dialect off the bat, they wouldn't think they need to help you. They wouldn't think they need to be there for you or to open up their, because you've already got it all together. Mm-hmm. And that gave me such hope, because I so do not have it all together in any area of my life. And so when I started thinking about it, I'm like, oh Lord, I'm like, there's a method to the madness. There's a being broken. Yes, we don't like the feeling of being broken, and we don't like the feelings of being inadequate or feeling like we don't measure up. But that's the whole point. We're not supposed to, because God uses the brokenness, and that's how he shows us how awesome he is. And that's been an ongoing revelation to me, especially like the last few years. And you'd think I would have figured that out, but no, it took me a long time to realize I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to make sure everybody loves me. I don't have to care necessarily. I want to be sensitive to other people's feelings, but I've got to be me, and I've got to trust that the Lord created me to be who he wants me to be in any context and in any situation, and just trust him when I mess up, that he's going to cover it, because I mess up.
As I said in the beginning, I think that's what I love about you. I mean, that's where we connected with you, mm-hmm. that you guys are just genuine. You're real, you have a heart for people, but you don't have to be fake and perfect all the time. And out of that, people are just so drawn to that. And that's a lesson that all of us need to learn.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I see a lot of people coming up, and we work with a lot of younger people in the field as well. And they're coming out of college, and they're so smart. I mean, these college educated people who are coming in, and they've had these goals and they've been so focused on their education. But I've also see it in my kids, even where if they don't get it right the first time, or if they aren't the best at it, they put so much pressure on themselves to be the best and to show that they can do it well and that they're right. And I think that if I learned that lesson years ago about not having to be right all the time and not having to be the best or look the best, mm-hmm. it would have saved me so much heartache and so much time with my counselor. And I think that if there's anything that I would tell anybody coming into the field or coming in a full-time pastoral ministry, just take some deep breaths and give yourself a whole lot of grace. He hasn't brought you this far. He hasn't given you the giftings that he's given you, and the education, if that's what you have, that he's given you, and the experiences of life that he's given you, to leave you stranded and make you feel like you're not good enough or not. I just know that he's got a plan for you. And when we were starting off in our first pastorate, I was really nervous, because I was working full time for an accounting firm, had 3 kids who were still, 2 boys especially, who were still struggling to find their place with us. Mm-hmm. They hadn't been with us for very long, and they were struggling. And I'm like, how do I balance this and be a pastor's wife, mm-hmm. and lead children's program and help lead worship? How do I do all of this? And I called my mom. This would have been in 2011 or 2012. My mom passed away in 2012 from ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And but she'd been in ministry for a long time. And I called her. I'm like, Mom, I'm really nervous. I don't know if I can do this. And she's like, Kelly, there are 3 things you need to remember in any area of your life, whatever you do for a living. 3 things you need to remember whenever you go into a situation where maybe you're nervous, maybe you want people to like you, or you got to love Jesus. And I know it seems pretty simple. You love Jesus, but no, you've got to love Jesus because that sets the foundation for everything. You have to love people because that's what he's called you to do. You love Jesus, you love people, and you do it. You're yourself. You be yourself in every situation. Don't try to be someone you're not. Don't try to force yourself into things that you know are not what God has you, but you feel like you have to meet a need. You got to do what God's called you to do, and you have to be who God's called you to be. So if you can just remember those three things, and I think that it's a super simple, but I can't tell you how many times I've reminded myself of that over and over and over again these last couple of years, especially being in Africa. So inadequate in every way, not learning the language, not understanding the culture, but just wanting to do what God wants me to do and not showing myself a whole lot of grace. And I just remember my mom saying that, and she passed away not too long after that, but it was one of those things where I'll always remember it. You just got to love Jesus, love people, and always be yourself. And he'll bring the fruit, and he'll bring you to the journey that you're supposed to be on.
And in the end, that'll preach. I mean, that is life changing. When we can get a hold of that and really have it in our hearts, then that changes our lives. For me, that happened with menopause because I was a perfectionist until then. I mean, you didn't show up I just hated making mistakes in front of people. But boy, that just changes everything. And I had that changed so much for me. I had to learn exactly what you're saying. Be yourself, love Jesus, love people, and that's all you can do. So
forget the rest.
Yes.
Well, and one thing that my husband has said for years, and it used to drive me nuts, because I'd be like, really? It's not that simple. It is that simple. Do your best, forget the rest. That is like his life motto. You do your best, you give it all to the glory of God, and then you forget the rest because you have no control over it. You have no control over what people are going to think, what people are going to say. You can only control what you can control, and that's that you're doing your best and you're giving it all to the Lord. And you may not say the right things sometimes, and you may do the wrong things sometimes, and you may be too loud in public, which but he's faithful, and you do your best and you forget the rest and you just trust Jesus with it. And it's pretty simple. And I thank God it's simple because I'm a simple person.
Me too. I hear you. I so can connect with what you're saying. And we could sit here and chat all day, but we've got to wrap this up at some point.
Yep.
So in closing, is there something that you would just like God has put in your heart that you would like to just share with women? This is your soapbox moment.
Yeah, I think that, and it's probably just a repeat of kind of what we've already talked about today a little bit, but I think throughout the word of God and throughout the Bible, you see examples of God raising people up who on the outside, they don't look like they would be worth, like, really, you think they're going to do that? They can do that for you. And, you look at the stories of Esther, and you look at the stories of Ruth, and you look at the story of David, and you look at Nehemiah, and you're like, really, a cupbearer? You raised up a cupbearer to rebuild. And I think that in my darkest moment this past year, it was pretty dark, Nehemiah came to my mind, and we studied Nehemiah. And it was just a reminder that God, he doesn't forget who you are. And he puts you in places for a purpose. He really does. And he put Nehemiah in a position that normally you would look at this position that Nehemiah was in as a cup holder, a cupbearer for the king, and you wouldn't think anything of it. But the way he brought Nehemiah to a place where he was the one who actually ended up leading and rebuilding. And I have to believe that for anyone going through a season of what am I supposed to do? What am I worth? I don't do anything. I don't have any real giftings, or I don't see myself as being talented, or they're going through a low point in their life where it's just hopelessness. I look at I look at the life of Nehemiah and I see how God raised him up, and I see how God used him to fortify a people, and I see how God used him, and I'm given hope again. I'm like, this is something that I can take with me, that, yeah, I may not be the smartest or the most educated or the most, whatever, but I'm available.
Right.
I'm here. I show up every day. And I know God can use me. And I think that that's something you show up, you work hard, you give glory to God, and you just hold loosely what, you own what he gives you because you want to do it well. But when he moves you to another season, or he moves you through to a different path, you say, okay, that wasn't mine anyway. God, use that. Where do you have for me to go next? And I think what I would tell any woman in the ministry right now, whether they're going through what I'm going through and what you're going through right now with the new season of life and a different timing of our life, or whether you're coming into full-time pastoral ministry right away, like you're young, right out of college, and it's just like everything's like, and for women now, it's like, it seems like there's a door that's being opened, hopefully even more for women in full-time pastoral ministry. Show up, be available, and know that the call on your life, it's a huge responsibility, but it's also an incredible opportunity to change the world, to change lives, to introduce people to a heavenly Father who sees them and knows them and loves them. Because the ultimate goal is to take as many people to heaven with us as we can.
Yeah.
So you stay focused, you stay available, you show up, and you trust Jesus, and you surround yourself with people who will speak life into you, and be honest and be truthful, but who have your best interest at heart. And this life is hard. It's hard. And you just you have to trust the Lord with it. And so I just did a whole lot of stuff, which I don't know if it all, like, I started with Nehemiah and now I'm doing, but it's all connected somehow. In my head, it makes perfect sense.
It made perfect sense on this end too.
Good.
And I have really enjoyed having this conversation with you. And I can't wait for everyone else to listen to it. I just, like I said in the beginning, you're one of the coolest people I know.
Mm-hmm.
I love whenever we get to connect with you guys. And I also want to take some time and encourage.
Could you do me a favor and email my kids and tell them that I'm one of the coolest people you know? Sorry. Just email my kids and tell them that I'm one of the coolest people you know. That would be awesome.
That'd be great. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I also want to encourage our listeners that if you're looking for a missionary to support, Bobby and Kelly Bailey are a great option. I don't think missionaries can ever have too much support, right? We're always, especially during this time with COVID, where people are giving and not giving, and it's just a whole thing. Like all Assemblies of God missionaries, your entire budget comes from the contributions of churches and individuals who donate on a monthly basis. And honestly, Jamie and I completely believe in supporting Bobby and Kelly. We are one of their supporters, not a whole lot because we're doing our own missions thing, but we do what we can because we believe in them and their ministry. So can you just tell, how can they get in touch with you or sign up to be one of your partners?
For sure. If you have any questions that you want to ask us about our work and what we're doing, since we do live in a sensitive country, we can't be very open online as far as social media, but if you want to join, find us on Facebook. We're Bob and Kelly Bailey on Facebook. You can join us there, and then I can take you over to our secret group and you'll get more information there. But you can always email me at kelly@markedpath.com, or you can go to our website. We have a website that you can go through AGWM. It's s1.ag.org/Bailey family. And
it's on the bottom. So.
Awesome. And then, and those are the best ways to be able to get in contact with us. We'd love to be able to send you our newsletter. So if you just want to reach out to me via email, I can get you on our newsletter list. We are so eager to let people know what's going on in North Africa and what God is doing there. And he is doing really awesome things. But we would love to partner with you in prayer as well. It's just, prayer is essential. And we need it. And I know you need it. So let's just do it together. So yeah, but that's where we're at.
Great. You want to connect with them. This is a ministry worth investing in. And I believe it's important that we, who are stateside, are supporting our foreign missionaries as they travel where we're not going to tell people about Jesus. I also want to take a moment and thank everyone who watched or listened. If you like what you heard today, we'd love it if you took a second and shared this podcast to your social media accounts. Also, don't forget to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. You can visit adessaholden.com to learn more about our books and our resources, or like the Adessa Holden Ministries Facebook page and YouTube channel. And that's all we have for today. I'm sure you totally enjoyed listening to Kelly, and we will see you next time on Girl That'll Preach.